working. Are they able to see presenter mode, or they are seeing the...
Yeah, just want to check with you guys online that you can see the display mode and not the presenter mode or anything. You guys can see the screen okay and you can hear us?
No, or is talking. Veronica, what can you see? See Veronica there. You see what you can see. It's good?
Yeah. Okay.
It's good.
Good.
Bye.
Well, thanks guys for joining online and in person for our CNM seminar today. So sorry for the confusion. We did double book seminars today, so that was unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks for joining today, guys. Really happy to introduce Dr. Elijah Kiarie, who's going to talk to us today about some of the laying hen research that they've been doing over the last 6 years or so. I think
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. So I'll pass it over to you, Elijah.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jenny. I think I need to start by thanking you, Jenny. These CNM seminars were dead until 3 years ago. You decided to bring them up, and I'm really happy to share what you're doing in the poultry nutrition space and share with our colleagues in the university and elsewhere. Today we'll talk about eggs. I'm sure probably if you didn't today, you did previously crack an egg for your breakfast. It takes a lot of research to have those hens give those nice eggs. But I'll be the only speaker because most of the work I'll present here is from undergraduate students who took 4700 or 4710. And of course, some students who left a while back. I think this is special because about 10 years ago, this family, Jim and Brenda McIntosh, decided that we needed to have a poultry nutrition lab in this department. At that time, Steve Reason, the only last poultry nutritionist here, had retired probably more than 10 years. And the university did have plan of having poultry nutrition professor here. And Jim, who was actually a student here back in 1959, did his bachelor's, and then he came back, did his master's, finishing in 1961, and went back to Huron County in a small town called Egmontville, became a very successful egg farmer. And when he was retiring, he decided that he will give the college some fund to establish this position. And I've met Jim many times. I actually meet him and Brenda every year, to be frank, for many things. One of the things is that I do update him what we are doing here through a lunch or some informal talk. But I also give him reports every year on our research activities. And when time allows, I do take my students to actually visit with Jim and his 2 children who are actually egg farmers. They learn from their parents. They are very successful egg farmers. And these are some of the pictures I'm showing you here with the students. This is Jim himself. And this is his son, Ross, and his wife, Barbara. They met students in a conference. And this Jim, when I said him an elephant head, he was really happy. This is right from Kenya. And this is another time Jim met a student for lunch. So we try to do this on a yearly basis. Before COVID, it was okay. Now we have not been able to do it. But I'm trying to plan one to take students there. But one thing Jim is always very concerned is, what are you doing with students? What are you training them? And what are they doing? Are they willing to come back here and support the industry? Because really, when he established this, he thought that there is a gap. We need to train people who will drive the industry ahead. And in that report I sent to him every year, pretty much half of it are stories written by students, personal stories really. These students are interviewed by the alumni office, and they give their personal stories on what having the poultry nutrition in this department means to them personally. their dreams, their career, and what they aspire to be. And you read here, and Jim really is really happy to always see this. So we have interviewed a few students over the time, and this really represents the student and a postdoc who has been interviewed to really explain to Jim what this means to them. So today we will talk about eggs. And for an egg producer, they only care about two things: the numbers and the size. Yeah? And when you think about these two things, is what makes them happy, because that's what they are paid for. So they want more eggs, and those eggs have to be optimal grade egg. Here in Canada, most of the eggs need to be in this category of 56 to 63 grams for producer to maximize revenue. So when you're talking of trying to solve farmers' issue, this is a conversation you have on your kitchen table. Okay? And of course, those eggs have to be crack-free so that then they are graded appropriately. Now, our colleagues in genetics have made a hen which will basically do that, produce many eggs and bigger eggs. Now, and you actually look at the hens and see the performance we see in today's hen compared to their predecessors of 1960s. This hen is able to produce a lot of eggs. And you find that within few days after, attaining sexual maturity, around 17, 20 weeks, this hen is able to produce 60-gram egg very quickly and stays on there for until 90 plus weeks, and then produce a lot of eggs and has very small body. Okay? So if you actually put those numbers in perspective, in 365 days, a hen will give about 330 eggs. And those eggs pretty much in the range of 58 grams. If you do the math, that's about 20 kilos of egg mass from 1.5 kilo hen. Okay? And very low feed intake. For that reason, is very efficient. This is the white hens. They are always very efficient because they eat less. You can see they have small body, so they have less to maintain. The brown guys, they're also efficient, but they do have a little bit of poor efficiency compared to white hens. Now, if you look at this and ask yourself, if you have a hen which is really, it's like a machine basically giving eggs, is there anything you can do or to improve this further? What I want to tell you is that there are very few rare nutritionists, because it's very difficult to feed these eggs, this hen rather, to perform this way. And one of the big issues the nutritionist has to deal with, feed cost is the king. Okay? You have to produce more egg at the minimum feed cost. So a nutritionist has to deliver that. The second and very important is fitness. For that hen to be able to produce those eggs for 70 plus weeks, you require a very strong skeletal system to sustain the egg quality, because the skeletal system of a hen is intimately related to eggshell quality. Right? And of course, as the hen age, get some issues with osteoporosis, again related to eggshell quality. And the other aspect is liver metabolism. Now, if you ever wondered what make up an egg, yolk is above 30%. And that yolk, more than 30% is fat. All that fat is processed in the liver. Now, if you think that the hen has to process all that fat, it introduces a risk of oxidative stress. So maintaining that liver into optimal condition is a tough job for a nutritionist. And ultimately, if you think about the producer of eggs, they have to grow the pullet for 17 weeks. That's an investment. So with the hope that that pullet will live full life. Okay? So if these pullets actually die after 5 weeks of laying eggs, it's a huge loss, economic cost. So keeping those pullets or hens alive is a big job nutritionists has to do. There's a lot of labs doing laying hen research. I just want to highlight how we do research and how we approach it here in Guelph. So we actually don't ask who came first, whether it's the egg or the hen. We know it's the egg, but this is not the type of egg you eat. This is the egg which gives rise to the pullet, which then become hen, which produce the egg you eat. All right, that's the cycle. So we didn't want to go back to pullet, to breed the pullet interface, to understand, can we create a strong pullet, robust pullet, resilient pullet before she actually starts laying eggs? So you're doing a lot of work in this phase here, trying to understand how we can develop a strong gut and functional gut, sound skeletal development, immunocompetence. I'll explain a little bit about that, although today I'm not going to touch anything to do with this research here. I really want to focus on this here. At the time I have, I'll talk about the research we are doing on laying hens direct. But before I go there, I just want to highlight some of the things we are doing on the breeder pullet hen interface research. And if you think about the egg, here's an egg I'm holding here. One thing which is remarkable, this egg always have 2 to 3 grams of calcium. It doesn't matter the size of the egg, whether it's a peewee or jumbo egg, it's 2 to 3 grams. Now, the thing is that when the hen was created in a way that you'll be able to shed 2 to 3 grams every day to raise an egg and repeat the same process tomorrow. And because of that, then have these special bones, they call medullary bones. They are packed with calcium because every time an egg is laid, 68% of calcium going to that egg will come from the diet, and about 30% or so come from the medullary bone. And that is replenished between the eggs. Now, if you imagine 7 weeks, the hen is doing this pretty much every day. That process sometimes don't work that way. And in the event, and this happen a lot, when you grow old, what happens? Your efficiency to absorb calcium go down. So are the hens. So in essence, therefore, then, this proportion coming from the diet decline over time. And what does the hen do? Get more from the bone. Now, if in the event the hen start depleting what is the medullary, start eating the structural bone, calcium. And that's where you start having osteoporosis. Now, every day, the hen will lose about 10% of body calcium to make the eggshell for you. But we know very well that the hen, the pullet, develop these structural bones by the 12, 13 weeks. So really the work we have been trying to do, again, very nice collaboration with my colleagues, Tina and Gregory, is to see how we can study the interaction between nutrition, physiology, and housing, because we know housing, particularly the changes in the housing, has a huge influence on the bone development. And again, this work, which has been completed for the last 6 years, some of it, I've had 2 PhD students look at this, Uhe and Reza, trying to understand whether feeding omega-3 fatty acid in broiler breeders influence the pullet development. Had Tanka, Dr. Canaro there, who was trying to look at the aspect of limestone and mineral nutrition. And Dr. Nejat Mohammed was actually a PDF in my lab a while back. I was looking at the aspect of the bone and housing environment and bone quality. And I had Aline, who is currently my MSc student. By the time she was working as an international student, looking at the aspect of spacing allowance. So this is a kind of cool research going on here. I'm not going to dwell much on that. I will show you that in future. The other aspect we are looking at is immunocompetence. And I want to dig here a little bit. You see, we know very well that cages are not good for the welfare of hens. And the cages are being replaced in most markets here in North America and elsewhere. Now, the new houses are good in terms of keeping the hen happy and improving their welfare significantly. But what is often not said is that the cages enable us to separate the hen with the excreta, which has a huge impact on their health. Now, the new type of housing you see, particularly uncaged, the hens are in contact with the excreta, okay? And then they also put in very large numbers in this. So this is actually coming from egg farmers of Canada, and they really want to research more focused on the optimal management practices to reduce disease, injury, and those kind of mortalities in non-cage housing. And I didn't want to talk about E. coli here because most of us know E. coli. If in any case you have any E. coli with farm animals, it's only young animals where you have issues with E. coli. But now you talk to veterinarians, there's a lot of E. coli issues in laying hens. And then you wonder, what's the E. coli? What's happened with the stories of E. coli? Because basically what happened, the E. coli is generally non-pathogenic. So long as they stay in the gut, But any E. coli which get out of the gut and get particularly the respiratory system is pathogenic. So one of the things we are trying to study here, again supported by Egg Farmers of Canada, is to understand the impact of certain feed ingredients and how they influence, first of all, the immunocompetence of the pullet to actually be able to withstand these kind of health challenges, and also the evolution of avian pathogenic E. coli. Again, I'm not a microbiologist. I don't pretend to be one, and I'm not going to. In that case, you have to get the right people who have the right expertise in this, and I'm really pleased to collaborate with Nicole Rika from pathobiology and Musa Diarra from Agriculture Canada. And we are really looking at that aspect of E. coli. Of course, I've had my postdoc go through here, try to study probiotics in laying hens and study the long term feeding probiotics to pullet to laying hens. I've also had Colin, is actually a master student who works in the industry today. Look at some aspect of yeast as immunomodulatory ingredients. And I have Veronica, the research assistant today in the lab, trying to understand different feed additives. Again, we have less data on laying hens on different antimicrobial alternatives. I have Junia and Paul, who are PhD students, who I hope they'll present to you next year on what they are doing on this area of immunocompetence. Now, as I said, I'm not going to dwell here. I want to focus here on what we are doing on laying hens for the interest of time. And I'll really just look at three concepts. One concept I look at is what we are doing to improve the hen nutrition in terms of improving protein utilization, what we are doing to look at improving or modulating the hepatic metabolism, and finally, the product quality. So for many graduate students who are in this call, if you remember what you learned in graduate school, when you're designing diets for monogastric animal, you have to watch the ratio between calcium and phosphorus. Has to always be 2:1. Because the mindset at that point, you are creating what we call hydroxyapatite. That's a bone, okay? And we know very well the ratio there is 2:1. For laying hen, we feed them for a different objective, to produce an eggshell. Eggshell has 10-fold more calcium, or there's need for 10-fold more calcium than phosphorus in the diet, which is good because we need to create strong shell, but present a lot of challenges most nutritionists are not aware of. One, for you to be able to achieve that level of calcium, you need more than 100 kilo of limestone, at least close to 100 kilo of limestone in that diet. Limestone is very strong, has very strong acid binding capacity, and the first thing you suffer from is that the hens are not able to digest protein ingredients because there's no denaturation. Okay. The second one is a cross correlation between the calcium and phosphorus. When you have too much calcium, it interferes with the phosphorus absorption. Number one. Two, I've worked a lot with the enzymes, but I can tell you I never fancy doing any phytase work with the laying hens because it never work. Okay? Because of too much calcium. Okay? And finally, if you really want to make soap from an animal, just feed fat to laying hen, and you're gonna see a lot of soap coming at the other end because once you have that combination of calcium and fats, you have that. Now, that has huge implication because if you have those fats being bound by calcium, they're not being absorbed, so you have actually energy problem. So you actually stack up the laying hen with other poultry species. What you see is that they actually excrete significantly more nutrients than any other poultry species. And that's basic because of calcium we feed them, limestone. Okay. Now, one, these nutrients are expensive. Two, they're actually the basis of emission we talk about. We talk of ammonia from these nitrogen being lost, which has detrimental effect to the birds themselves and the workers. And of course, we talk of pathogen and all this and microbial story. The biggest nutrients which limit pathogen growth is nitrogen. The moment you have nitrogen going to the high gut, you have problems with any animal, particularly monogastric animal. What have we tried to do? We have tried to address some of these issues, particularly looking at the protein level. I've had 2-3 master students look at that. One student, Arisha, looked at the feed structure and gut function in laying hens. Then I had Ilona look at okay, let's reduce protein, feed birds require amino acid. Let's feed them amino acid and see whether we can actually have better nitrogen utilization. And then Zipporah replaced soybean meal with insect protein. I will now highlight some of their research. Now, we know again from graduate school, if you are thinking about digestive physiology, the finer the particle, the more you expect the nutrient to be digested. Okay, and that holds true for poultry as well. But poultry don't have teeth. I know whether you have ever heard what the teeth of poultry is actually the gizzard. And that's why you see even sometimes you put your chicks in the floor pens with the shaving, they're with shaving, even if you have a very nutritious diet, because they have innate need to eat structural material to stimulate gizzard development. And there's a lot of work again going to the literature showing that there's a good relationship between feeding large particle size, which influence the gizzard weight and the protein digestibility. And basically the mechanism here is that when you have the gizzard functioning this way, you have more exposure of material to pepsin and hydrochloric acid, meaning more digestion of protein. And we actually did a review back with this student, Arisha, way back. We have seen about 70,000 views and almost 3,000 downloads, meaning this is a topic of interest to the industry. But it's a conundrum. How much particle size do you influence? And to maintain the gizzard and also to have better nutrient digestion in the lower gut. Now, there are two ways you can manipulate the particle size of poultry diets. You either grind the grain, coarse grind, or you can introduce structural material like oat hull. What Arisha did is to say, well, I want to use oat hull, and I want to understand whether oat hull have actually many benefits to laying hens. And she went a step further and said, well, I want to see whether I can grind it. And she tried to do a very hard job. She actually ended up regretting about it. Try to grind this material through the hammer mill was a tough job because to get it to these particles, she had to do it quite some few hours. Okay, but she also wanted to understand what do we see when you feed this structural material to modern laying hen and heritage hen. Do you see difference? Now, the good thing with us is that in our care we have these heritage hens which are, I think, donated by Shiva. And you can use them to study certain aspect to understand whether the current genetics compare with the previous genetics. And obviously, we find that the older hens, which are not genetically selected for egg production, they eat more, they are heavier, but of course they produce less egg. So what she did then to say, well, I'll feed them controlled diet and replace that controlled diet with 20% ground and unground oat hull. Now, what did she find out? First of all, you look at the gizzard here. She actually found a very strong interaction between the breed of the hen and the diet, which means that the response of the gizzard to the structural material in the feed was dependent on the genetic of that bird. Okay? And you find the modern bird actually responded strongly to having structural material there. You actually see that when you actually grind it, you get much less response than when you have it unground. But surprisingly, we did not see any benefit of putting this in the diet in terms of nutrient digestion. In any case, we actually see some negative effect of ground oat hull when it comes to digestion or the retention of fiber, retention of cooked protein and growth energy relative to control or bird fed and ground oat hull. So it's quite surprising. So again, the knowledge we know about the particle sizes in broiler chicken, it appears that when it comes to nutrients, we need to rethink. But this is, again, at the executive level. We still need to do more on the upper gut to see whether actually we see some benefits in the EDO level. Okay? So the other work we have done is to reduce crude protein. I think this is done a lot. I know my colleague, Leanne Huber, does a little bit of work here in pigs to reduce crude protein. It's a straightforward concept. Pigs and chicken require amino acids. They don't need crude protein. And increasingly, we have seen a advancement in biotechnology. We can produce this free amino acid. And right now, I think there's a company which was telling me they can do 12 of them. which means we can reduce the crude protein by replacing soybean meal with free amino acid. So what Ilona did, Ilona worked for Hawkemix here in Ontario. She reduced the laying hen diet by about 2 percentage points protein and introduced all these amino acids. And she fed them to hens between 28 and 46 weeks of age. And what you see here are actually some really high level summary of the data. We did see some small drop, it's significant but small in egg production, which then eventually ended up having a slight poor feed conversion. But you can see significantly less nitrogen in excreta, okay? Meaning that obviously those birds were at a better way of utilizing nitrogen. Zipporah, again, she got the soybean meal diet formulated to meet the nutrient requirement for laying hens and said, well, I want to replace all that soybean meal with insect protein here. So once you do that, one of the things you do, the insect protein, there are some amino acids which are deficient compared to soybean meal. So then what you see some amino acid you have to bring on here. So but nonetheless, our diet has all the nutrients balanced. What did she find out after feeding this for all that time? Well, these birds fed the insect protein. They had lighter eggs. Okay? And that lighter egg, right, tended to have lower egg mass and poor FCR. Okay? But these hens ended up having eggs very strong shell, which could be partly attributed to the fact that they have a smaller eggs, but could also be partly attributed to the fact that probably insect protein based, probably chitin or something, is improving calcium metabolism for some sort. But really what was surprising is that the hens were becoming larger and the liver was becoming bigger, meaning that they are accumulating fat, which is not good, right? So I think insect protein, a lot of potential, but these kind of things is what they're looking at, because if you have this hen getting fatty liver, and I will explain that shortly, it's a much huge problem to deal with than replacing soybean meal with insect protein. Another concept to look at is the fact that, as I said, the hen genetically will always allocate 2 to 3 grams of calcium in the egg. But we know as the hen gets old, what happens, the egg becomes large. And once the egg becomes large, the thinning, particularly on the palisade layer here, right, start thinning because it's being stretched to accommodate bigger egg content. Okay? And as I said, hen, when they get old, they absorb much less calcium. So basically then the nutritionist has to balance here. Once this hen hit 50 weeks or so, you usually have to start worrying about the egg weight and how to control it, right? Now, and this is done. In most cases, what the nutritionists do is to start dialing down the protein, okay, to control the exercise, because exercise largely is driven by the protein and amino acid, particularly methionine. Now, by doing so, what then happens, these hen diets actually are more richer in calories, which lead to this problem of overconsumption of energy. I have no time to dig into this deeper than what Jim Squares and Steve Friesen did a while back. But when you start reducing crude protein, you actually introduce a risk of having what we call fatty liver hemorrhagic syndrome. Okay? And that's basically, as picture shows here, is rupturing of the blood vessels. Okay? And in most cases, it's related by consumption of energy, overconsumption of energy. There are so many solutions out there people use. You can use, for example, autotrophic factors, things like copper sulfate, choline, vitamin D, methionine. Can also change according to Steve Friesen. Instead of supplying energy, more energy via carbohydrates, supply it as fat, which then relieve the liver from the needs to synthesize fat from carbohydrates. Another way, because the major issue here is rupturing of blood vessels, which end up leading to hemorrhage, is to control oxidation. Okay, so antioxidants are very important, things like selenium, vitamin E. But what is much important if you have a mental nutrition is trying to deal with this condition. Once the frog get into this issue, it's very hard to bring them back to normal egg production, and that's a huge loss to producer. Okay. So what we have been doing here is try to focus more on addressing the antioxidant status on these parts. So Canada is very endowed with a lot of fruit. We grow a lot of fruit. If you actually now drive this way to Niagara or go to St. Jacob Market, you find a lot of fruits. And whenever I go there, I don't think about the sweetness of fruit. I actually think about the fruit skin and what it has. We have done a little bit of survey, and if you analyze the pomace, which is really the skin of the fruit, you'll find that we have a lot of antioxidant phenolic compound in these skins of fruits, okay? And much so on cranberry and blueberry, which are growing in bushes in Quebec and elsewhere in BC. So this can be a solution, okay, to help the hen be able to overcome. Because we want them to produce more eggs and live longer. You can use them as a solution to maintain that fitness in the river. And not only that, these phenolic compounds can actually replace partly vitamin E. Right now, vitamin E is $15 a kilo, and all of it comes from China. Okay, so you can have homegrown solution to vitamin E, right? So I've had 3 undergraduate students in this front try to contribute some research to understand pomace. We have some pending work coming, and hope that it will go through. We will have a PhD student to actually do much deeper research on this area, it's particularly in laying hen and how we can control the river metabolism with that. Okay. I think I still have time here. So now, so I know most of us here in this call, in the room and in the online, you eat eggs. Okay. Actually, I went to the Statistics Canada website and tried to understand the trends of Canadian consumption of eggs. And a consumer has a choice when they go to supermarkets. If I'm a consumer and I want to have a poultry protein, okay, I have a choice of buying an egg, or I have a choice of buying a chicken meat, say chicken breast. Okay. Now, I actually looked at the data in the website, got the prices over the last since 2016. Okay, all right, and tried to calculate based on the concentration of protein in breast meat of broiler chicken and the egg. You actually find that the egg protein is much more expensive than breast meat. So if my kid come today and tell me I want to have poultry protein, I'll actually tell you, eat chicken, it's cheaper, not an egg. Egg is an expensive source of protein. So, but then if you look actually that data here, you'll find that around 2019 here, the price of egg protein, that's the time it starts shooting. What happened in 2019 back there? We had COVID. Okay? So that means the Canadian consumer buy egg not only as a source of protein, but they see some other benefit in an egg. And we know that. We know egg has other things. Egg actually is life, has everything to support life. And one of that component in an egg is fat. Okay? If you are looking for good fat, you find it in the egg. We have heard of omega-3 eggs. Okay? And there's no secret. Back 9 decades, this researcher here, I think from UK, realized that you can manipulate the egg fat by what you feed the hen. And 50 years, for more than 50 years, we know we can produce omega-3 eggs by feeding eggs, hens, rather, feed rich on omega-3 ingredients. And thanks to a lot of work Steve Reason did here 20, 25, 30 years ago to actually promote Canadian flaxseed as one of the ingredients to promote production of omega-3 eggs. This flaxseed, which is actually manufactured by a company in Saskatchewan, is sold all over the world. And I'm always very pleased to meet those guys whenever I travel in those parts. Now, so then you might wonder, you buy your eggs, omega-3 eggs in the store. You find that, well, we can always find these eggs. There's still a lot of unanswered questions as to feeding these hens omega-3 eggs, omega-3 sources, and the egg you see in the store. One of that, as we know that from human health perspective, the omega-3 fatty acid, which actually impact health, are the DHA and EPA, right? Now, to produce an omega-3 egg, the most sustainable and the most cost-effective way of doing that is to feed oil from oil crops, okay? Things like flaxseed, all right? So now, and they are very effective. When you feed them, you find that you actually enrich those eggs with omega-3. And the more you feed, the more omega-3 you get. And this data here actually going from the researcher and I try to plot it. You can see this is near perfect relationship, Jenny. This 80% can be explained by that. But the fatty acid you are seeing in this yolk is what we call alpha-linoleic acid. It's not DHA and EPA. The hens, just like human, they are very poor in converting alpha-linoleic acid to the long-chain fatty acid, which we really need, EPA and DHA. Okay. And again, I go back to that data and try to plot the intake of alpha-linoleic acid and how much DHA is deposited in the egg. There's actually virtually no relationship. That means the more you feed alpha-linoleic, you don't get more DHA, right? And this is well known. We know that there is a rate limiting step in the liver in conversion of alpha-linoleic acid to long-chain fatty acids. And that rate limiting is actually more associated with these 6-delta desaturases. Okay? And the thought is that if we can actually overcome this step here, we can probably produce more DHA egg by just feeding seed oil. Okay? Now, and people have attempted to do this. If you follow the technology in plant breeding, you'll find that back 10 years ago, there's actually some researchers in US who introduced a mutation in the soybean seed so that then the soybean seed can accumulate this fatty acid here, which then means that it's bypassing this step. So then the idea is that then if you feed this fatty acid to iodonic acid or SDA, you'll have more enrichment of DHA. And I think they got this gene from bread mold or something like that. And well, sometimes you may have this concept which really work well on the benchtop because then at that point we will tweak this, we'll have SDA-rich oils, and then we have solved this problem of producing DHA eggs. So now, this work done at the university, I think is University of Maryland, did a trial, and there are many trials done in hands. And what they designed a trial where they said, well, we're going to supply the same oil in this. We're going to have the soy oil. We're going to have SDA-rich soy oil, flax oil, and fish oil. Then you collect those eggs and try to analyze the DHA level. You actually don't see any difference between SDA and alpha-linoleic acid, which therefore means that really the rate limiting step is not here. It's somewhere down here. Somewhere we don't know. So, and that became the end of SDA oil because even in human and mice studies, the conversion was decimal. Okay? So really, the only way to have DHA is to have fish oil, okay? Even in eggs. So now, we know fish has a lot of problems. Okay? Accessibility, the cost, sustainability, anything you talk about that. Yeah? Now, but lucky, again, that's why I love R&D, is that someone has come up with a way of growing algae, which is rich in DHA. And these actually two oils we tested recently has almost 60%. One has almost 60% DHA. So these are a good solution to produce DHA-rich eggs, all right? Now, Student Anderson did a trial here recently, and actually fed these two oils and fed them at low level and high level. There are two types of oils. So the idea is to have the same DHA at each level, okay, low and high. But then what you see, you actually enrich the eggs with the DHA quite significantly. But this data, what you cannot see here, this relationship between here is actually quadratic. In other words, the more DHA you feed, you actually don't get up getting equivalent DHA in the egg. And if you actually plot that, you work on that data plus other data sets in the literature and try to calculate the amount of DHA the bird is consuming and the amount of DHA is deposited in the yolk, you actually see that the relationship is there, but it's about 60%. But if you actually flip this chart and try to calculate transfer efficiency, you'll find that, and this transfer efficiency is basically the amount of DHA put in egg as a ratio of amount of DHA consumed. You actually find that there is actually a negative relationship. So that means the more DHA you feed to these hens, you actually don't get back that in the yolk. So the next question is therefore then, what is happening in the hen? So if you think about what happened for the hen to put this fatty acid in the egg, the first thing which need to happen is the hen digests these fats. They absorb through potomicron. They get to the liver. Once they get to the liver, the first thing which need to happen, they need to be repackaged back through esterification to triglycerides. And then those triglycerides are packed into very low density lipoprotein, which are then packed to the bloodstream and is transported to the developing oocysts in the oviduct to be packed in the yolk. Now, what seems to happen is that looking at the data we have at least is that the liver has limited ability to incorporate dietary DHA in the VLDL particles. How that is happening, we don't know. But what we see again in these hen through Anderson trial and others is that the more DHA you feed, you actually find some liver becoming heavier. So meaning this fat get into the liver, get accumulated there, does not get transported to the yolk. So other observation is the fact that the more DHA you feed, you actually see reduction in triglyceride in the plasma. Now, triglycerides are very important in egg hens. As I say, 30% of the egg is egg yolk. That egg yolk, significant part of it is fat. Now, if you have less triglyceride being transferred in the yolk, you're going to have smaller eggs. Again, that is against the farmer interest of the numbers and the size, all right? So therefore then, we need to look at this, because if we have to think of producing DHA eggs, we need to start understanding the transportation or what influences the transportation of this fatty acid from the liver to the extrahepatic tissues, and this is mainly the sink, the big sink is the egg, and other tissues in the animal, okay? And of course, we don't want the birds becoming fat because you are feeding them DHA, because that again will produce some problem, okay? So there's an active area again. We're gonna be going back to look at what's happening with the DHA, a lot of feeding of DHA. So I think Jenny now with time doing well. It's good, right? Still have time, but I think that's my last slides, okay? I think I'll stop here. So now, so that we can have time for questions. Now, all this work I have presented and others, it cannot be possible without the student who have passed through the lab. And that's the lab in 2017, 2018, 2020, 21, 2022, and finally 2023. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to mentor the next generation of the leaders in the industry or whatever they will be, the future president and prime ministers, as they may be, I don't know. But really important is the colleagues I collaborate with here at the University of Guelph and elsewhere, and the staff in ACEL, Dave and Ines. I know sometimes requests are urgent, But I really appreciate the fact that you're able to accommodate student needs, train them, understand them from wherever they come from, and teach them to become successful chicken people. The federal government, the provincial government program. I really want to thank Egg Farmers of Canada, Egg Farmers of Ontario. They believe in the stuff we do. They support the quota of the chicken we have in Akara. Without their support, we can't have the chicken to do research with. And of course, funding the research directly. And finally, many Canadian private businesses and international businesses who support our work. We really appreciate your support. Now, I think I'll stop here, Jenny, and enjoy and entertain any questions.
Thanks, Elijah. Okay, hopefully this works. So maybe we can just escape there so you can see. Any questions for Elijah in the room or online? We'll just make it so you can see there. Just go over to the chat. Oh, yeah, Jean, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask.
Okay, last week at the Poultry Health Day that PIC put on there, I believe, Elijah, you were there.